This is the Science of Nutrition and Label Reading lecture for Exercise Science 219. So how do consumers get nutrition information? Well, there are lots of ways. Social media is extremely prevalent. Food marketing, food labels you look at, we always think of commercials, especially to children. But also, we have to consider celebrities and current TV shows such as The Doctors and my favorite, Dr. Oz. So, how do we know if we're getting nutrition misinformation? Well, we have a checklist that kind of takes us through the steps of what we should look for. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're getting misinformation, but I would say that this checklist can at least give you a clue that maybe you need to dig a little deeper for better information or for some nutrition research that may back or not back the product. So first of all, is something being sold? So the number one reason for nutrition misinformation to consumers is the profit motive. You cannot assume that just because somebody is selling you something and they say it's fantastic, that it's going to work. Now also, does the product offer an easy fix? For example, lose weight in a week. Are there magical, unmeasurable terms being used, such as secret or miracle weight loss? Are there testimonials, before and after photos, or expert endorsements being used? Once again, this does not mean necessarily that there is misinformation, but it could be a cue to you to check further. Does the information sound too good to be true? Chances are it might be with nutrition. And is there a money-back guarantee offered? So how do we know if a source of nutrition information is reliable or not? Well, the first thing, absolutely 100%, we've already talked about in class, is scientific evidence. So does it meet the standards of scientific evidence? Have there been multiple studies? Is there a scientific consensus on the topic? And we should know that nutrition recommendations made to the public are based upon science and based upon information, the best information that we have available to us now as nutrition scientists. So things such as MyPlate and dietary guidelines are reliable sources of nutrition information. Any online sources for nutrition should end in .gov, .edu, or .org. And knowing that your qualified nutrition professionals are actually called dietitians, sometimes you'll see it together as dietitian nutritionist. Here are some examples of places that you could potentially look for reliable nutrition information. So just a quick check on your knowledge about nutrition misinformation. By law, claims about nutrition that are presented on product labels and packaging must be scientifically accurate. That is true. So they cannot make claims on product labels or packaging that cannot be backed up. The leading motivation underlying the presentation of nutrition misinformation is the profit motive, and we already said that that is absolutely true. The FDA has the authority to remove advertisements making false claims about nutrition. That is false. It is actually the Federal Trade Commission that has that authority. And nutrition information offered by trained sales staff at nutrition product stores can be counted on as being accurate. And we know that's already false because, once again, we're doing that checklist and they're trying to sell us something. So once again, it might be accurate what they're saying, but also keep in mind that they're trying to sell you a product. Now, let's get into the meat of this lecture, food labels. How do you read these? So this is a standard food label. There is specific regulations on what font, what size, what things are supposed to be on the food label. Any product that is not a whole food product, so for example, meat, fruits, and vegetables, things like that, produce, have to have a nutrition facts label on it. So this is the very important quick guide to how to deal with a food label. I would highly recommend making note of these particular areas. Specifically, when you look at your food label tomorrow, I really want you to take that assignment, adhere your food label you bring into a piece of paper, and pinpoint these specific areas and make notes about them. So the first thing you want to start with is the serving size. This is really important. So a lot of people don't check how big a serving size is because that sets the standard for what the rest of the information is about. So secondly, where you're checking calories, which are 250, that is for that serving size. So it's really important that you start with the serving size. Then once again, you're checking calories. The next thing you're going to check is the things that you're supposed to limit. So in this case, we're talking about fat, cholesterol, and sodium. So looking at those things to see which, where they're at. The fourth thing is checking the, what I call healthy stuff, like get enough of these in the food that you're looking for. And so with that, you're looking for all the vitamins and minerals that are listed below the black bar, but you're also wanting to check that dietary fiber because that's a very important component that Americans do not get enough of. Next, let's check that footnote. So it's very important to note that, similar to what we talked about in class, that the nutrition food label is based on the average healthy adult. And it's also based on a 2,000 kcal diet. So these percentages that you see in this number 6, the percent daily value, that percentage is based upon a distribution that is for 2,000 kcals per day. So I like to tell people that it's a quick and dirty guide to help you determine if a food is healthy or not, but know that it may not necessarily fit into what you need for your DRI. And also, if you notice on that footnote that if you consume 2,500 calories, it does give you a quick guide for what the fat, the cholesterol, the sodium, and the carbohydrates should look like if you're on the 2,500 kcal per day diet compared to the 2,000. But for the average woman, we're talking about 1,600 to 1,800 kcals per day. So it's going to be a little bit different. Okay, so the quick and dirty guide in number 6 to percent daily value. How do you know what these mean? How do you create meaning out of these percentages? Well, first of all, 5% or less is considered to be low, and 20% or more is considered to be high. Now, whether that's a good thing or bad thing depends on the particular nutrient you're looking at. So, for example, calcium is listed as 20%. So we know that is considered a high calcium product. Now, that's a good thing because we're talking about getting enough of that nutrient. However, for total fat at 18%, it's getting near to that 20% because it's kind of on the higher side. So you can see in that case it is considered to be a higher fat product. However, in this case, that high is indicating a negative thing. So this kind of just gives you an example of what could be the big difference in not looking at that serving size first. So doubling your calories from fat. It's really critical that we educate people to check that on a food label first. So this kind of just goes over what we just talked about percent daily value. So those percentages should equal 100% of the daily value that's recommended for that particular nutrient. So that DRI or RDA or whatever the recommendation we have is for the average healthy adult. Now, once again, this is based on that 2,000 kcal daily diet standard. And so we know that individual diet needs are going to vary based on multiple factors. However, it's super helpful when you're just trying to consider if a food is healthy or not by using that 20% or higher and 5% or lower value. Now, I'm not going to expect you to do these calculations I show here. It's just an example of how it does the math for you on what that looks like. However, I do expect you to know about the 2,000 kcal per diet and that 20 and 5%. Now, just make sure you know to get enough of these nutrients. It's all the vitamins and minerals and the dietary fiber that are listed. Once again, taking a look at that footnote, knowing that we do have some calculations done for us based on that 2,000 kcal per diet and then that 2,500. I think this is a much better picture of the things that we need to note. So once again, when you are going back and looking at your label reading from the class assignment and adhering your label to the piece of paper, I would really like you to highlight these different portions on your own label, make notes around it based on these key points. Now, we have no percent daily value for proteins, sugars, and trans fats. So, why do we think that's the case? Well, trans fat, we should theoretically not have any. It's not recommended, so there wouldn't be a percent daily value. For sugars, we're really having a difficult time setting what that standard sugar is. It varies from different health organizations, such as the American Heart Association and what the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics recommends. And protein, once again, we're talking about a range there. So it's not going to give you a percent daily value, similar to the way that carbohydrate and fat would. So what is trans fat? We're going to talk about this more in the lipid lecture about what this hydrogenated means. But for now, know that it's a partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. So it could be palm, cottonseed, soybean. However, it's added to food to lengthen shelf life, but it is a very bad fat for you. It raises your risk of heart disease by lowering your HDLs, which are good cholesterol, and raising your LDLs, which is your bad cholesterol. And the interesting thing to note about food labels is they're not required to report trans fats on the label when they're less than 0.5 grams per serving. So there could be a little bit of trans fats in there, but they've determined that it's a negligible amount under that 0.5 grams per serving. So here just gives you an example of what you're looking for with that trans fat. It's not going to say trans fat, but you're going to get that partially hydrogenated some type of oil. But notice this label says trans fat free as well. Okay, so the ingredient label. Quick and dirty thing you need to know about this. Ingredients are listed in order of weight. So most weight in the product comes first, least weight comes last. So in this particular product, enriched flour is the largest weight in the product. Now, I want to point out the differences in the ingredients and some of the nutrients in this particular food product. So you have a juice that you notice on the label says 100% pure orange juice, and you're comparing it to maybe a Sunny D that contains 10% juice. Notice that our 100% juice gives us more of that percent daily value of the nutrients, potassium, vitamin C, calcium, the things that we want to get enough of. But I'd also like to point out the ingredients list here, because calories are about the same, fat's about the same, but it's really those ingredients we're talking about where there's a huge difference in the fact that we have 100% pure squeezed orange juice and the 100% juice. And then if you have that 10% juice, we're giving water and high fructose corn syrup as the primary ingredients in these products. And so when we're thinking about educating parents about what to give their children, we definitely want to recommend that 100% juice, and the food label will tell us why. Now, these are important definitions that you should know, the nutrition claims on labels. So there are 3 different types that are considered to be appropriate for labels. The first is a structure function claim. And so this is a statement that describes effect on the body. And so normally it's not very specific. It's normally related more to like an organ system. So it's a little vague, helps maintain mental health, promotes heart health. I gave some examples here, supports immunity. These are not regulated or evaluated by the FDA. So because think about the fact that they're vague, they're just saying, oh, it may help promote your digestive system. So they can't really say a very specific component. Now, a nutrient content claim must meet the FDA's criteria for content on that food item. So for example, low fat has to be less than 10% of the daily value in a serving of that food in order to be called a low-fat product. A good source of fiber also has to meet specific criteria. It has to have so many grams of fiber per serving. Lean, very similar. It has to be specifically for meat less than a certain percentage on fat for that serving. So those types of claims on the outside of the products are actually regulated. And then the last one is a health claim. So the reason you can tell the difference between this and structure function is a lot of times it's very specific about what it's going to lower. So you go from vague to specific. It's the relationship between a specific disease and that nutrient, and it must be supported by scientific evidence. So with the soup you're talking about, may help lower cholesterol, Cheerios lowering cholesterol. It's being really specific about what that disease process is. So we've had some recent changes in nutrient claims law. So the organic labels are certified by the USDA. However, do you know that organic means that it is 95% or more organic? So maybe it's not 100% organic. We now have this certified gluten-free label that is being certified and has rolled out that if it has this, it has to be gluten-free. We also have some food industry initiated labeling sometimes. General Mills started this whole grain guarantee. They're not required to, but it's their own particular way of showing to their consumers that they are meeting certain criteria. Often we also have a nonprofit organization such as the American Heart Association that certifies certain food that have their own criteria for what meets a heart healthy food. And the other thing is calories on menus at restaurants. This is a new thing that's rolling out. In order to meet this, they must have 20 or more locations nationwide. So your mom and pop around the corner are not going to be required to put calories on the menus. And what does the word natural mean? I'd like to really point out here the word natural has absolutely no meaning in the nutrition content claim field. So if a product has the word natural on it, it could mean a variety of things, and often it is actually used more for food marketing purposes. So this assignment is not applicable to your class, but I would like to remind you that you need to make sure to bring your labels, and we'll be working on reading our labels and doing the label reading worksheets.